Hey team, I thought I would get together with Matt again for another one of our little chats. We've been talking amongst ourselves about, obviously a hot topic right now has been motivation and motivation in athletes. And we started chatting about some of the times that perhaps in our lives when we felt the most motivated, and some things that we've observed with athletes over different periods of times, and even in just the history of great athletics and the really great moments in history with all kinds of different sports and performances. And the one thing that I brought up is there a level of, if an athlete feels almost a level of desperation, or a better word that we said is urgency to perform, is that, this is maybe even a question I have, or I've certainly observed from both ends, is that create a fire in an athlete that brings out exceptional performances that they might not otherwise bring to the table? Or is the burden of that for some athletes so great that it actually crushes them and they're not able to perform at all? And so one of the examples that I used when we were talking about this was, when I was racing professionally and I knew I had no money to pay the rent, pay off my card for groceries, I would go to a race, and I'd been in this circumstance a couple times in a half Ironman, and I knew there was good money for, first place, and my bonuses from sponsors were good money. And if I was passed for second place, it was like I was doing the math in my head, and it was so important to me to pay for, to win that race in order to get the money that I needed to pay my bills, that I would pull out runs in a half Ironman much faster than I had displayed in training, or that I thought I was capable of. And, I'd said to Matt even that my coach, when I first started this sport, always ingrained in me, he said, you need to train with a sense of urgency. That this time period, it's certainly at a professional level of elite athletics, isn't going to last forever. And so you need to train with almost an urgency. And I've certainly seen it both ways. We were talking about this, Matt, where different athletes, we talked about some different things that you've witnessed as a coach, and you're obviously like a sports historian as well. So I'll get you to throw some thoughts here.
Yeah, I definitely think that when athletes have a stronger sense of whatever word you want to apply to it, whether it be urgency, whether it be desperation, whether it be like, give you an example. I was thinking when we were talking about this, about years ago, I saw a documentary on the Bulgarian national weightlifting team. Now, at the time, this was back in the 1980s, the Bulgarian weightlifting team was the juggernaut of the sport. They were just a dominating force that nobody could defeat. And their coach was pretty notorious for being a real, hardcore dictator, taskmaster kind of guy. And I remember watching this documentary. There was a part in it where the coach had the whole team sat down for a meeting before one of their training sessions for that day. So the whole Bulgarian team sitting there, the coach is in a chair in front of them, and he's talking to them about, the day's training and what he expected of them and everything like that. And at the end of his little lecture, he said something, and I came to find out this is something he said to him a lot. He said, make sure you remember that your stipends will depend on the results of these training sessions. In other words, he was just flat out telling them how much you get paid is going to be determined by what you do in the gym, what you produce in training. I mean, a lot of these guys are married. Some of them had kids already. So they're thinking about this, and they're thinking, okay, how I do today is going to determine like whether or not my family has enough money to eat next month. I mean, was there a connection between that idea and the fact that this program spent years just annihilating world records and winning world championships and stuff? Probably. Yeah, I think you could make a case, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, it's okay, so you think, well, how does this relate to me? And perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps this is a conversation just to have a conversation about. But one of the things I thought about is just in humans in general, do we, is there and we can relate to this even right now as the world is changing so fast and there's so many things happening. Do humans in general, if they're put under pressure to a point where they think there really is no other option, I've got to make this work, I've got to come out ahead, I've got to better this situation. When we're comfortable and we've got a lot of choices and things seem pretty smooth, and maybe I called it, we've got a kind of a plan B. When there is no plan B, when all of a sudden it's like there is no plan B, it's you got to do or die. Do we as athletes, people in general, step up and bring something to the table that's really special that we might have not even known we could do? Perhaps there was something holding us back, a fear or just a disbelief or confidence or whatever, or maybe even just didn't see the vision that was even possible. All of a sudden, when it's a do or die, there is no plan B. You think, all of a sudden it clarifies, this is what I need to do to get this done. And so that's just something that I've been thinking about recently. It sort of popped into my head when I thought, literally it was that phrase that popped in my head, is what if there is no plan B? And really all you're faced with is, I've got to do this in order for things to get better, for me to succeed, in order for, like you use the example, I've seen plenty of parents, new parents where they're racing full time, they have their first baby, and one of them rises to a level of results that maybe they thought was past their time or they weren't capable of, because now they know they have a baby that they've got to feed, and a sense of responsibility that they have to, this do or die type situation. I've certainly heard of stories throughout generations of athletes where they thought, if I don't make this team, or I don't get this result, then I have no backup plan, or my backup plan is so miserable that's not a choice that I consider even an option. And so it's kind of like that plan B isn't an option. And so now you really step up to the table and bring forward something that you never even knew was possible. So I don't know if you have any great examples of that, or things that that you've seen as a coach and athletes. You certainly said yours wasn't related to this type of pressure of do or die in terms of financial or just living circumstances. You knew, you're a weightlifter, but you also had a career outside of weightlifting. But it was more of an urgency of, I have to perform, because it was something that was driving inside of you that was a very, I don't like using the word desperation because it's a little bit negative, but almost a bit of, desperation. It's like, I've got to get this done. I don't know if you want to share that a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and they're going to think to themselves, well, I'm not in a position where my livelihood or my mortgage payment or my kids' meals depend on my results as a triathlete, and I'm never going to be in that position. So does any of this relate to me? I think it can, though, because as we were talking about, I think there are plenty of situations where the athlete has that kind of urgency and that kind of desperation and that kind of like, there is no other option, but like failure is not an option type mentality. But it's not related to life circumstances or money. It's related to like what's going on internally with them, like what's going on inside. I think there are plenty of people, and I was like this as an athlete because, weightlifting was never a sport that, that paid my rent or paid my bills. It just wasn't set up this way in that country when I was coming up in weightlifting. But I can absolutely say that that mentality of I have to perform well or everything's not going to be okay, I brought that to every day of my career, and the not being okay part was in here. It wasn't about rent payments or mortgages. It was, if I didn't perform to the level that I believed I should or believed that I was capable of, it's like I wasn't okay inside.
And it might even be for like, as we're having this conversation, for some people, it might be if I don't change my lifestyle and start to lead a healthier lifestyle, then the alternative is, perhaps an illness that is going to, impact their life and their family forever. Or it might be, there's all kinds of different circumstances within people's lives where it could be an urgency of, if I don't just keep showing up every day, then who I am as a person, mentally, emotionally, physically, health-wise. There is that urgency. If I don't turn this around, then, you know, the impact long term is almost like that urgency of, say, a professional athletes, or it's, if I don't win this race, I'm not going to get to pay my bills. If I don't turn up every day and lead a healthy lifestyle and just keep showing up, perhaps my life is going to fall to a place where, you know, it's you know, in dire straits. So I think, you know, when we talk about motivation right now, as we move through so many changes with the world right now, and perhaps, you know, people are, you know, every range from super motivated to even just sort of wondering, why am I even doing this anymore?
Questioning their whole career.
Is this even important anymore? Perhaps you start to look at, you know, is there something in your life that there is an element of urgency, or do or die? Like, create a scenario of, what if there is no plan B? What if all of these changes that are happening right now, and all of the things that we're being presented with through, you know, this year, creates a situation where you're looking at something going, there is no plan B. I've got to make this work. Now, whether that be in your athletic life, your personal health life, be in your, you know, maybe in your career or your personal life, or whatever that may be, look at that, hey, there is no plan B, I have to make this work, and say, you know, is my motivation there? And all of a sudden, are you given, you know, the confidence and the vision and the direction suddenly pops up in your mind of exactly what you need to do to get that done. And I think that's when we look back on history of great moments and a lot of things. So when we see, you know, really great things happen, you know, if we look back, it's those moments where, hey, this massive change happened for someone, and they come out, you hear them, they come out the other side, and they're just, you know, so much victory ahead of where they even thought, or a vision was created that wasn't even there in the first place, and it's because they were backed into that do or die type corner. So hopefully this helps you as you go through, you know, these different times, and maybe are either super motivated and you have very clear vision and you know what you're driving towards, and if you're not, maybe these are some suggestions you could take and have a conversation with the people around you.
Yeah, these are unprecedented times, so there are going to be unprecedented things going on in people's heads and going on with the way people think about their athletic lives. So if any of these conversations or any of these ideas can hit home with somebody, then it's worth it.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.